My name is Sherry Powers, and I'm going to be your co-host today for this session. This session is called How Much Can I Afford? And our goal here is to help you all understand how you can take your gross income and calculate how much you can afford to pay and for a home mortgage, right? And let you know what's comfortable, how the numbers are calculated, and really how much you can afford. And keep in mind that um, the lender is going to be qualifying you for the maximum loan amount you can afford to borrow to purchase your home, and you have to ultimately decide what's comfortable for you. Okay, so we have three presenters today. Myself, Sherry Powers, um, from San Francisco Housing Development Corporation. We're a nonprofit housing development corporation down in the Bayview district of San Francisco and on 3rd Street. And then we also have two folks from Wells Fargo Home Mortgage, Gloriana Seja Diaz. Hopefully I pronounced that right? Seja?
Good job.
Seja.
Good job.
Okay, Seja Diaz from Wells Fargo, and Adolfo Ferretti. Is that Italian, Ferretti?
It sure is.
Okay,
Welcome,
Adolfo
everyone.
Ferretti from Wells Fargo. Yeah, so we're really excited for you guys to join us. We have a little bit to cover. It's there's some math at the end, so hopefully you'll stay to the end to get the worksheet. The materials for this workshop, both the presentations and the worksheet sheet are available for you to download on the Homeownership SF Expo website. So where you went in to see everything that was being offered this during the expo, there should be a download where you can download your materials. Okay, so Catalina, are you able to mute that button that alerts us when people join?
Yes, I'm trying to figure out how to do that. Okay.
I'm gonna try not to let the ding dong.
More.
The virtual
Got
world,
it.
right?
Okay, it's gone.
All right.
Sorry about that.
Excellent. No problem. No problem. So want to encourage you guys, if you have questions, to type your questions in the chat box. We are going to allow room for questions. And we want to provide you with as much information as possible to squeeze into 45 minutes. And we're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end to answer questions. Okay. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, so again, we're going to be talking to you about, how much can you afford? So the first thing is to think about this in terms of the 4 C's of credit or the 4 C's of lending. So lenders are going to be looking at your character, which is comes to them in the form of your credit history. So when they pull your credit report, they're looking at your overall credit history as well as your scores. So character is the first C of credit. Capacity is the second C of credit. So capacity is cash flow. How much money do you have available to pay a mortgage and property taxes, homeowners insurance, and all the other things that go into your housing payment as a homeowner? I like to tell people that homeownership, getting the house is the easy part. Keeping it and maintaining it is where the work comes in. It's the difference between dating and marriage, because you've got to have a cash flow sufficient to continue paying the loan until it's paid off. And then after that, you still have to pay taxes and insurance. So capacity is what the lender is going to look at, and that is going to be your gross income compared to how much debt you have. The third C we're going to be looking at is capital. Capital, think of capital as cash. How much cash do you have available to put into this investment? How much money do you have for down payment, closing costs, and reserves? Reserves is money that you would have left over at the end of the transaction, because the lender knows we don't want you to spend your last dollar buying this house. Because one thing is for sure, the first 2 years of homeownership is the toughest. You're going to be eating top ramen and some sort of fake protein, probably tuna, to get you through the first 2 years, because it's going to be an adjustment. So we want to make sure you have money left over. The fourth C is collateral, and that's the property. The lender is going to evaluate the property and see if it's worth what you're willing to pay for it. It's got the appraised value has to come in on at the same as the purchase contract. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to borrow as much. They're also going to look at the condition of the property and see if they want to lend on the property, so the collateral. And then there's also kind of a hidden fifth C. So after you get pre-approved, once you get into contract and you get that conditional loan approval, there's a fifth C called conditions. And all of those conditions have to be met and checked off before they're going to fund that loan and record the property as yours. So the 4 C's of credit, or the 4 C's of lendings, plus the hidden fifth C of conditions. All right, so as I mentioned, so credit, your credit score and history will determine not only what kind of interest rate you're going to have to pay, but it might also determine your down payment requirements. Bad credit will cost you in the end. You will pay more over time with a lower credit score and worse credit history than you would if you have a better credit score. Typically, lenders are going to pull your credit from the 3 main credit bureaus, and they're going to throw out the high score and the low score, and they're going to use the score in the middle. They call it the mid score. If you only have 2 credit scores, they're going to lose the lower score of the 2. If you're applying with another person and you have excellent credit and they have crappy credit, they're going to use the mid score of the person with crappy credit. So both of you have to work on this credit homeownership journey together. Both people want to be working on improving their credit score together, decreasing their debt together, because the other person's credit will impact the overall lending package, because each one of you are individually and severally liable for payment of that loan. So even if you get divorced, God forbid, you're still both liable on the loan as far as the lender is concerned. No court order will remove your liability from the loan. The court may say who has to pay, but it will not remove your liability for that loan. Okay. And of course, every loan product is different. Each loan product may have different terms that get triggered by a credit score or credit history, and lenders might overlay certain requirements on a loan product. So there may be like a loan product that is offered through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, which is our secondary lending partners, and each lender may have slightly different overlays on that product. So you've got to ask your loan officer what their loan products, what the terms are for those loan products. They do vary. And Adolfo and Loriana, feel free to jump in anytime, you guys, if you have a comment. So a couple of things. You guys want to check your scores, right? You want to check your credit score and check your credit history. You want to do that before you go to the lender. Okay? Because if there's anything on there that you need to fix, you want to do it before the lender pulls your credit report. You can go to www.annualcreditreport.com to get a copy of your free credit report. Now, in the past, we've been saying, once a year, you can go get your free credit report from each one of these bureaus. But since COVID, the bureaus have allowed people to get a copy of their credit report for free every month, because there's a lot of fraud going on. Fraudsters love a crisis. And recognizing this, the 3 credit bureaus have made it possible for each person to go in and pull his or her credit report every month to see what's happening. You want to be monitoring your credit history and your credit report, because the fraudsters love a crisis. Identity theft is on the rise. So make sure that you go to annualcreditreport.com. Do not go to freeannualcreditreport.com. That is a scam site. Not go to free annual credit report. Go to annualcreditreport.com. Cannot highlight that enough. Okay.
And that is the one that Wells Fargo recommends as well.
Yes,
the annualcreditreport.com.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing about when you pull your credit report, you're not going to get your scores. They will actually charge you to get your credit score. So if you want to know what your credit score is, you should work with your housing counseling agency, because we can pull the same credit report that your lender will pull we charge you a flat rate, like SFHTC charges $25 for 2 credit reports because we work with people to actually build credit. And so we'll offer 2 credit reports over 3 to 12-month period, so you can see how things have changed. And that credit report will give you the score. So we get it through Credco. It's a residential mortgage credit report, just like the one the lender would use. So if you want your scores, go to your housing counselor and have them pull it for you. Okay. And oh, by the way, when your housing counselor pulls it, it's called a soft credit pull, because we're not pulling it to extend you credit. We're only pulling it to counsel you and help you build your credit. So we're allowed to get a special soft pull account that does not impact your credit scores. Okay, there's a number.
And I would highly recommend this, Sherry, because some of us do sign up for credit alerts, and a lot of the times those scores are not accurate.
Correct.
Because they look at a much shorter time frame of credit. So Sherry's credit report is going to be the one that is going to really give you a better picture of where you stand before you come to a Wells Fargo type.
Yep. Adolfo.
Yes. So the cost of owning a home, right? So your upfront cost is going to determine the maximum loan amount that you can afford. Second here. So one is your down payment. That's your upfront cost. You have your closing cost to consider. In addition to that, you'll have your escrow, which is typically your property taxes and homeowners insurance, your reserves. So the lender wants to make sure that you have money saved in case there's a situation that you stop receiving income, right? And also your moving costs. So those are some of the upfront costs that you need to consider of owning a house. So now your ongoing cost when you own a property are the following. So you're going to have your mortgage payment, you're going to have your property taxes and homeowners insurance, because when you own a property, you have to pay property taxes and you have to pay homeowners insurance. In addition, if you purchase a condominium, and the condominium will typically have a homeowners associations due, and that's a monthly cost, an ongoing cost, as well as your utilities, any maintenance and repairs that you'll need to do as a homeowner.
And so as we look at what you can afford to borrow, we're going to be talking specifically about your mortgage payment, which is your principal and interest payment, your property taxes and homeowners insurance, which is the T&I. So we have this acronym called PITI, PITI, and then I like to say MIA, PITI MIA. PITI MIA, I'm a first-time home buyer. So it's your principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, if you have to pay it, and HOA dues. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I just wanted to point that out, that these 3 items is what the lender is looking at when we're talking about your housing payment as a homeowner. We're talking about your ongoing mortgage payment, principal, interest, taxes, and homeowners insurance. And by the way, in San Francisco, if you use the mayor's program, and you buy a condo or a townhouse, they will require you to have condo insurance. It's not as expensive as homeowners insurance, but it is, the condo insurance covers all of your personal property inside the unit, and it also covers any damage to the unit from the studs inside. So as a condo or townhouse owner, you are responsible to damage to the walls, to the ceiling, and to the floors, everything from the studs in. So your condo insurance would cover that. Okay. All right. So again, what did I just say? PITI.
Sure.
What is PITI?
Sure.
Right? PITI is your housing payment. So your PITI MIA, PITIMIA.
All right, so your suggested housing cost should not exceed 33% of your monthly gross income. If you click this pie here, this is how you should break down your income, your gross income. So 33% of your monthly gross income should go towards your housing expenses, which as Sherry was talking about a few minutes ago, it includes your PDMIA, which is the P stands for principal, the I stands for interest, the T stands for taxes, property taxes, I is for insurance, and the MI is for mortgage insurance. And typically mortgage insurance is an additional expense associated with your mortgage payment whenever you put down less than 20%. And as Sherry mentioned, if you own a condo or a townhouse, then you have HOA fees, right? So out of your gross monthly income, 33% should be budgeted towards your housing expense. 62% should be budgeted towards your other expenses, right? Utilities and so forth. And then 5% of your gross monthly income should be allotted for your other debts.
So this is an example of the ratio. So we're going to be talking about ratios for the remainder of this this presentation. So 33% is the suggested ratio. Every loan program is going to have different housing ratios. So 33% is the front end. We call it the housing ratio, and that's your all of that PITIMIA. And then the other 5%, you add that to the 33 and you would get 38%. So your loan product may have ratios of 33 over 38%. That means that your housing, your loan product says you are not allowed to spend more than 38% of your gross household income on your housing payment plus all your other debts combined. And so 33 again is the maximum that you could spend in this particular example on your housing payment. You don't have to spend 33%. It would be great if you could spend 29%, right? But this is an example. Your loan product may have ratios that are higher of this. They may allow you to go up to 38% on the front end, in which case this light blue area would encompass all of this. That would be your front end ratio. And maybe they allow you to go to 41%. So you might come out to here on the dark blue area. So the ratios on the loan product's going to vary. And then again, some lenders may be more conservative or more liberal than others. And so these numbers are going to vary. This is just an example. And this 62% is an example of all your other expenses, right? So the lender is not going to let you spend 100% of your dollar on your housing payment because you got other stuff you got to pay for. You got your payroll taxes, you got lifestyle expenses, you got a bunch of other stuff here that is not included in this 33 over 38% ratio. And so that's why ratios exist, because there's stuff out here that you have to pay for on an ongoing basis. And this stuff might impact how much you can borrow. So this stuff, all your other debt, right? This stuff could impact how much you can borrow. All right, so we talked about property taxes. So we're just going to give you kind of a little bit insight into property value. So your property taxes are going to be based on the assessed value of your house. The assessed value equals the purchase price when you purchase it. And then in California, your property taxes can go up a maximum of 2% every single year. So when you buy a home, when you close escrow, the taxes that are collected, you want to ask your loan officer to make sure they collect enough taxes for the purchase price, because on the tax roll, it's just going to be based on the seller's property value. So yours is going to be higher typically. So your property tax is based on your assessed value times 1%, which is typically the county rate. So each county collects a certain amount for taxes. And then every time you go to vote in elections for a bond measure to pay for parks and garbage and street cleaning and blah, 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 all that stuff gets added to special assessments and fees. And those fees get added to your tax bill. And so as a homeowner, you're going to pay a bunch of additional assessments in addition to the 1% county. These are things that voters vote for the most part, get added to this 1%. And that equals the property tax amount that you're due, that you have to pay every year. So in San Francisco, this rate is about 1.7%, I believe. I know in Oakland, where I live, it's about 1.44%. When we use this in terms of estimating costs, we typically estimate 1.25%. That's the default rate that's most lenders use when they're doing these calculations. But if they know you're buying in San Francisco, then they'll use the higher San Francisco rate of 1.7%, so that they know that they're using the correct monthly estimate for your tax rate. So otherwise, your PITI is going to be off. Okay. All right. So your impound account is, again, Adolfo spoke about it before. It's called escrow. So an impound account is an account that's maintained by the mortgage company to pay your taxes and the homeowner's insurance. And if you have to pay mortgage insurance, this is going to be included as well. And so, sorry, I have to go get some notes here. So the annual property taxes, so a portion of this, a portion of your homeowner's insurance and your monthly mortgage insurance premium is going to be included into your impound account. Even though you have to pay HOAs every single month, these are not typically included in an impound account. So these three items, right? When we figure out the total amount that you're allowed to pay every single month, we have to estimate these three items and set that aside. And that's what we're going to do in another exercise a little bit later on. So again, Adolfo was talking about mortgage insurance. I like to think of this as default insurance. This is what the lender requires borrowers to pay. Typically, you may have to pay mortgage insurance if you have lower credit scores, or if you put less than 20% down, or it's simply a condition of some loan products like FHA. If you get an FHA loan, you've got to pay mortgage insurance regardless of how much you put down, and it's for the life of the loan. With other loan products, the mortgage insurance may be built into the interest rate or into the pricing of the things. So just keep in mind that generally speaking, if you have lower credit scores or you put less than 20% down, you may have to pay mortgage, i.e. default insurance. And this protects the lender in the event of your default. So this is default insurance, okay? This is not life insurance. Oftentimes you may see something that says mortgage life insurance. You are not required to get mortgage and life insurance. This is default insurance that protects the lender in the event you default on your mortgage payment. So anyway. Loan options, Adolfo. Or I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Okay.
Yeah, I'll take that one. So there's definitely loan options for you to consider whenever you're purchasing a home. So traditionally, there's two types of loan options. There's your conventional loan programs, right? Generally, they require, you can put 20% down payment, or if you choose to, you can put as little as 5% down. So remember, whenever you put less than 20%, you'll need to, you'll have the default mortgage insurance, as Sherry called it, right? So that'll be part of your cost associated with your monthly payment. Your second loan option, it's really a government insured loan. And this is your FHA loan, where you can put down as little as 3.5%. You do have to pay mortgage insurance, and the mortgage insurance is for the life of the loan, right? At some point, if you want to get rid of that mortgage insurance, you'll need to refinance out of this FHA program and go into a conventional loan. Your other option, your other government insured program is your VA loan, which has 0% down payment, zero closing costs for military. And then the third option is your CalHalfa with as little as 3.5% down payment. So something for you to consider when speaking to a lender. A good lender is going to offer you a few different options, and it's going to give you a side-by-side comparison to see how the loan term, the loan type will impact your monthly payment.
And so some lenders have what we call portfolio loan products as well, right, Adolfo?
That's correct.
And you guys create your own rules on those products and you keep those, right?
Correct.
So there may be other options that they can choose from. So these are generally speaking what most lenders offer. Okay.
Loriana, that's you.
You're muted, Lori.
Loriana,
Sorry
you're
about
muted.
that.
There you go.
Sorry about that. I worked out into something different, but not a problem. So when we look at pre-qualification, and we'll talk about the different types of pre-qualification, what we're trying to figure out is based on your income, your credit, your assets, how much home you can afford. And so in order for us to figure that out, we use a calculation. It's called debt to income, to calculate more or less how much you can borrow. So what we look at is, we look at your gross income and we look at your total debt. And based on that, we can come up with the figures. Some of those were figures that Sherry's already shared with you when she referenced the front end, the back end, a housing ratio, the debt to income ratio. The debt to income ratio would be your back end ratio. And that one is probably a little bit more important in our world, but it looks at your total ability to borrow money. At that point with the pre-qualification, we're also establishing how much down payment you can do. And so when you go to apply, the pre-approval one, it'll establish how much purchasing power you have. At that same time, we're establishing how much loan. A lot of the times I tell my clients, every client has a limitation. And it's usually you're either cash strapped, you don't have enough down payment, or your income is not enough. So in that pre-approval process, I work with my clients to try to figure out between those two scenarios, which one, where my clients fall. It'll also tell us, you applying or even reaching out to a lender doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go out and start shopping. But it does give us an idea, and yourself as well, as when that day, when that time will come. If we've got to work on credit, if we've got to work on maybe the down payment, that pre-approval time frame is really that time so that you can kind of get all your ducks in a row, right? At Wells Fargo, we do not charge any fees for our pre-approvals. We do order credit, and we do use Credco as well. Like Sherry said, that's a good one to use. And then we verify your income. Now, there are different types of stages. In my world of pre-approvals, your initial phase, we are running credit. We don't necessarily verify income and assets at that point. But in the Bay Area, that first step of getting pre-approved is almost a prerequisite in order for a realtor to take anyone serious. The next step at Wells Fargo, and I do say Wells Fargo because not every lender out there offers this, but it is what we call a loan commitment. So if you, based on our conversations, and we find that you are ready to move to the next stage of a pre-approval, you're happy with the purchase price range that we're giving you, you're happy with the programs, everything's lining up, then we would have a conversation about having you take the next step and sending your file into an underwriter. When we send your file to an underwriter, at that point, we do require you to provide us with your income and asset documentation and any type of written letters of explanation, for your certain scenario. What that allows an underwriter to do is to verify the housing ratio and your debt to income ratio. So we try to do a lot of that up front, but it doesn't become set in stone until the underwriter does that. And once you have that loan commitment, then it's kind of like Wells Fargo saying, I'm going to set aside $500,000 for my borrowers to go out and shop for a home. In the housing front ratio, ideally the numbers that Sherry shared with us on this call, those are our ideal nationally. There are programs that allow you to push those to, a little bit further. The housing ratio, I think really what is comfortable for most is a 35% max. especially for a first-time home buyer. And a back end in most programs is going to be 43%. And, I think, to reiterate again what Sherry's already said, is it doesn't, I've had clients that say, but, I need it to go higher. Well, we also have to take into consideration your style. You've got to live, right? You've got to pay Uncle Sam taxes. And so when you start backing those figures out, you'll realize that 43% is actually pretty much an aggressive number. It's not going to leave you with much at the end of the day. And so those are really important, because, it does take maybe 24 months to really get comfortable with the expense of owning a home. So a lot of the times there are programs for first-time home buyers that are going to limit these ratios lower than national published ratios, only because lenders want to make sure, and not even lenders, even consultants like the ones that, with the gals that we've got on today, they just want to make sure that you can ease into that level of responsibility.
And so with that in mind, let's do some math. And so we're going to actually run through this worksheet, and we're going to use a scenario. We're going to do it together. And so I want everybody to find the chat bar. Make sure that you've got the chat up so that you can type in some responses. So get your phone out with your calculator, because we're going to do some math. Okay. And so this is a 10-step process that we run through in our homebuyer workshops. We have an intro to homeownership class that we teach. And this is a really important way for you to estimate what you can afford to buy, and play around with how the ratios will impact your purchasing power, how the escrows, the monthly escrows, HOA costs will impact your purchasing power, and also how the interest rate will impact your purchasing power. So if you could get out your calculators and let's do some math, okay? So is everybody ready to go? So if you can, also there's some, if you hit the little button that says more, you can choose reactions as well. So if you're ready to go, give me a thumbs up so I can see that you guys you're ready to go. You want to do some math. We're trying to make this there you go, as participatory as possible. Thumbs up. Okay, so we got some people who are ready to go. So we're going to work with a hypothetical couple. I'm going to go to another presentation where we're going to spell this all out. But in this case, we're going to use hypothetical 30, 40 something couple with an annual household income of $60,000 a year, divided by 12 months is $5,000 a month. So I'm going to switch screens, and I'm going to share my other screen that actually has these numbers up. So my bad. Let me go back to the beginning. Okay, so we're going to do this activity. Can you guys see this? How much can I afford? Thumbs up if you can see it, please. Okay, so what you're going to learn how debt reduces your purchasing power or influences, how the lender's ratios influence your purchasing power, escrow cost, interest rates, and then the thing to keep in mind that these debt ratios that we've been talking about do not take into account your other expenses like payroll, lifestyle savings, retirement. Okay. All right. So let's get going. So here's the worksheet again, different colors, same exact example. So we're going to start with gross income of $5,000 a month. So now the ratios we're going to work with is a 33% housing ratio. So I want everybody to take 33% and multiply it by 5,000. You're going to take 5,000, multiply it by 33% or 0.33. Please type your number in the chat box. What did you get? Type your number in the chats. What is 5,000 times 33% or 0.33? Okay, great. I see some math whizzes coming through. Great, great. So you've got it. So 33%, that's your housing ratio. 33% of 5,000 is 1,650. So in this particular program or product, the lender is saying you can only spend up to $1,650 on your housing payment. And remember, we said the housing payment was the PITI MIA, principal, interest, taxes, insurance, mortgage insurance, if applicable, and association dues, homeowner association dues. All right, so then the back end ratio in this particular example, I think we used, excuse me, 41%. I'm going to cheat. I think it's 41%. So you all find 41% of 5,000, or 5,000 times 0.41. And if you could type in your answer in the chat box, what is 5,000? Okay, 2,050. Okay, let's go a little higher. Let's use 43%. What is 43% of 5,000? Now that you've given me the answer, I know that I changed the example because we're trying to mimic some of the ratios that the city programs have. What is 5,000 times 0.43%? Type it in the chat box. Excellent, excellent. Got some math whizzes out there, right on? Right, so 43% debt ratio is 2150. So this ratio, 43% back in debt ratio, so this is the maximum amount of debt that the lender is going to allow you to carry. Now remember, of this 2150, you can spend up to 1650 for your housing payment. So what's the difference between 1650 and 2150? What's the difference between these two numbers? Type it in the chat box, please. What's the difference between the 1650 housing payment maximum and the 2150 back in debt payment maximum? $500 exact. Oscar, you're a sharp. Oscar's on top of the math. It's $500. Okay, so that means the difference between the back end ratio and the housing ratio means that you can have up to $500 in debt before it impacts your purchasing power here on the housing ratio. Okay, but let's take a look at your debt. So the next thing we're going to assume is some debt. So in this example, we're going to assume that our 30, 40 something couple has debt payments that total $625 a month. They've got a car loan plus student loans plus a few credit cards. Okay, and their monthly debt, we're just going to make some assumptions, is $625 a month. So that's greater than the $500 difference between these two numbers. Okay, so part 5 of this exercise is you've got to subtract the monthly debt from the back end ratio. You're going to subtract 625 from 2150. What do you have left over when you subtract the monthly debt from the maximum back end debt ratio? What do you have left over? All right, Lauren, math whiz. Anybody else? Do the math. Yes, it's important to do the math. 1525, everybody else agree? Only a couple of people doing the math out there. Okay, Kelly, Oscar, thank you. Right, so when you subtract 625 from 2150, you're left with 1525. So now this is what you have left over for your housing payment. Which one is lower, line 2 or line 5? Which one is lower, line 2 or line 5? Which one is lower? Line 5 is lower, right? So line 5 is now the new number that we're going to work with in terms of your maximum housing payment, because your debt of $625 has decreased your purchasing power by $125, right? Because we knew that the spread between these two numbers is 500. You've got $625 a month in debt. So that extra $125 has reduced your purchasing power from $1,650 to $1,525. Okay, is everybody with me? Give me a thumbs up if you're with me. Is everybody with me? Thumbs up if you're with me. I don't want you to get lost. Is anybody lost? Okay, you're good. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to we're going to look at the next 3 steps. So now we're going to enter in the lower of line 2 or 5. And so 1525 was the lower of the two. So line 2 was 1650, remember? And then line 5 was 1525. And the lower one is because our debt reduced our purchasing power. And then the next step that we're going to do is we're going to take that 1525. Now remember, that's our whole PITI MIA payment. We have to estimate how much to set aside to cover escrows. How much do we need to set aside to cover taxes, insurance, and homeowners dues? And so in this example, we're going to use 35% of 1525. Okay, so 35%. So line 6, we're going to write in the lower of the two was 1525. We're going to write that into line 6. And then we're going to multiply line 6, 1525, multiply it by 0.35 or 35%. What do you get? Multiply 1525, thank you, Lauren, by, somebody want to check her math? 1525 times 35% or times 0.35. Anybody else? All right. All right. I was just checking, Lauren. Okay, you're cool, right? So 35% of 1525 is $533.75. Now that's how much we're going to set aside in this hypothetical for taxes, insurance, and HOAs. If anybody's been looking at properties in San Francisco, you know your HOAs are probably already $500, right? So this may be a little low, but again, this is an example. This is just a way to do the calculations to get an estimate of what you can afford to borrow, okay? So now that we found out what the escrow set aside is, we're going to subtract this number from 1525. So when you subtract line 7 from line 6, what do you get? Subtract line 7 from line 6, what do you get? Type it in the chat box, please. All right, so hopefully you got this number, 991. Good. 991.25 is what's left over. So basically, this is what you have left over to pay for the mortgage, just the mortgage, the principal and interest payment. So in this scenario, this is the maximum principal and interest payment allowed. So the question you should be asking yourself was, how much money can I borrow and keep my principal and interest payment at 991? It's a lot of math, for sure it is, right? How much money can I borrow and keep my payment at 991.25? So that's what we're going to show you next. So that's 9 and 10. So I'm going to show you the answers, and then I'm going to show you the chart. Okay, so we have what's called this table is one of the handouts, and on the back of it is an amortization chart. I'm going to show you the amortization chart, and then I'm going to come back to this slide. So this amortization chart is taking fixed year, so we've got interest only, but we've also got different amortization terms. So we've highlighted the 30-year fixed amortization term, and we've highlighted some interest rates, right? These are kind of the rates that have been common in the last couple of years. So in this example, we're using 4.25%, this 4.25% down here. And we're going to go all the way over here to the second to last column, which is 4.91940. Okay, so write this number down. We're going to come back to this. This is the factor for a 30-year fixed mortgage at 4.25%. Okay. And then the other example we're going to look at is what happens you get a lower interest rate. So if it's 3% at 30-year fixed, we're going to use this factor, 4.21604. So basically it's like $4.21 per thousand is what you pay at 3%. Okay. So we're going to write this number down and we're going to go back to the example. So let's go back here. Okay. So here we're going to take the payment 991 divided by the factor for 4.25%. So the factor is 4.91940. You're going to use all the decimals and you're going to get 201.498. Okay, if you multiply that by 1,000, you get $201,498. That's the maximum loan amount. Okay, and so then if you do that for 3% and you divide 991.25 divided by 4.21604, you're going to end up with 235,000. So what you should notice here is that the interest rate makes a big difference in your purchasing power. So here at 4.25%, you can only purchase 201,000 and change. At 3%, everything else remaining the same, you get an extra $34,000 in purchasing power. So you're at $235,000. Is everybody still with me? Thumbs up if you're with me. I know it's a lot of math and we're going really fast. Okay. So let's see what this looks like if your debt is not a factor, right? So if your debt is not a factor, line 2 is 1650. You only have $400 a month for debt. You're below that $500 a month threshold. Then line 6 is 1650. You're going to multiply that by 35%. You get 577 set aside for taxes, HOAs, and insurance. And then you're going to subtract 577 from 1650. You're going to get $1,072 left over for principal and interest payment. You're going to divide it by the same two factors. So remember, this 4.9 is the factor for 4.25, and the 4.2 is the factor for 3%. So under the 4.25, you go from 401,000 to 218,000 simply because you had less debt. So it's a difference of about $17,000 at 4.25%. At 3%, you go from, I think it was $234,000 to $254,000, simply because you had less debt. So in this case, your debt is the difference of about $20,000 in purchasing power. Okay, so your debt is going to reduce your purchasing power, right? The lender's ratio. So if those ratios are higher or lower, then the maximum amount of loan is going to change as well too. Escrow counts, the more you have to pay in taxes, insurance, and HOA, the lower your loan amount is. So escrow cost can also reduce your purchasing power. Interest rates, same thing. The higher the rate, the less you can borrow. The lower the rate, the more you can borrow, all things remaining the same. And remember, ultimately, that debt ratios do not take into account all your other expenses. All right. So I'm just going back. So that was these 10 steps in a nutshell. I know that was really fast, but it's all about the numbers, right? So if that was overwhelming, you should definitely work with a housing counselor so we can walk you through those steps. All right, Jared ran his own numbers. All right, cool. Okay, great. I'm so glad it's helpful. So this worksheet is available in the materials. You can download it and run your own numbers. Okay. Yeah, I'm so glad you guys found that helpful, because I think it's really important for each one of you to do the numbers and see how they change based upon interest rate ratios and your debt. I like to tell people that $300 a month in debt can sometimes be the difference in $20,000 to $40,000 in purchasing power. All right, so you want to start preparing early for homeownership, right? You have to track your expenses. You absolutely have to track your expenses and then stay on track. You want to make sure your credit score is excellent, right? You can, of course, get a loan with a decent credit score, good credit score, but the better your credit score, the better your options are going to be. You have to have enough money saved. So part of the 4 C's of credit, remember we talked about that: capital, capacity, credit, and collateral. Those are also the reasons why you get denied, right? So if you don't have enough money saved up to close the transaction, what we call cash to close, you can be denied. So don't go on a spending spree and spend the money you had saved up, because that could impact the required reserve amount, okay? You also have to have a 2-year history of consistent income in the same industry. So I know that right now, you know, some people are scrambling, right? You're changing industries because maybe you're in hospitality and, you know, you haven't worked in a year because the hotels just are not doing that kind of business anymore. Maybe you were doing Lyft or Uber and you're driving and you got to do something different. So, you know, work with your loan officer to get creative about how you can put together that 2-year income employment history, but it's typically the same industry. If you go from being a W-2 employee to self-employed, that could also have an impact, because once you become self-employed, they don't really have a history of how well you're doing. So you've got to be careful about that kind of switch as well. Have you paid off or reduced your monthly debt? Like we just saw, your monthly debt can be a huge factor in how much you can afford to borrow. And then you've got to keep your documents and your records, right? So maybe there's some owed stuff that pops up on your credit report and you're just like, I swear that got paid off. You've got to have the records, right? You've got to have the records to prove that something was resolved. Okay. So again, Adolfo and Mariana, please feel free to jump in here. What do you guys want to say to these folks about affordability and being prepared for home ownership?
You know, I would say, you know, it's pretty simple. It's never too early to start, you know, the conversation. I think a lot of the times it seems intimidating because you feel that if you make that initial phone call, that you're kind of, you know, strapped in to work with that person, or you have to commit to something. And you know, Adolfo will agree with me that that's not the case at Wells Fargo. We want to talk to you. We want to make sure that, you know, you get your ducks in a line, because we do want to be part of that process. I joke around saying, you know, you've got to look at me like your girlfriend now, right? We will, you know, sing and dance together, but we need to establish that trust, because buying a home is a stressful situation. And I know it, for me and for a lot of people, it's a bucket list item, but it can be overwhelming. And so working with the team that can support you, I think, is really the best way to overcome those fears. And prepping, right? We've been prepping since we started school in kindergarten. So buying a home should not be any different. You've got to prep to get there.
Yeah, don't do it at the last minute.
Yeah, I mean, unless you win the lotto, then whatever you want to do.
Yeah, then you hire that guy who says my lotto dream house, you know, and I see that show and I'm like, wait, you still have to pay taxes and insurance. Can you really afford it? You know, and the maintenance for these 4,000 square foot homes with the open plan, I'm like, the heating and the cooling costs, can you afford it? Right? It's the ongoing cost.
Yeah. So, but I think it's a bucket list item, and I think it's part of the American dream. And I don't think that anyone should give up on it. And don't feel bad, because I think when you look at things and you look at living in the Bay Area is expensive. Just don't let that deter you. I think there's ways that, you know, working with, you know, these gals, they're fabulous and they know what they're doing. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, how do we hire them? Can we hire them and get them to come over?
I already work for Wells Fargo.
They're great. They really do know what they're doing. So, you know, trust them.
The other thing you could do to practice, so there's a question in the chat box, how long to prep minimum? So you know what, I always tell buyers, you know, if you, so when we do an affordability analysis for you as a housing counseling agency, we're going to look at your total gross income and your debt. But we're going to say, you know, if you had no debt, this is what you can afford to borrow based upon, let's say, today's interest rates plus 0.5%, right? Because it may be a couple of years before you get into the market, right? And so we always use a higher interest rate to do these affordability analysis. So we're really using 4% right now. Now, if it's lower, so much the better. But we look at that and it says, let's just say that your housing payment, that PITIMIA, is going to be $2,500 based upon just your income, right? And you're only paying $1,800 a month for rent. Some people are saying, I wish I only paid $1,800 a month for rent, right? So the difference between The PITI MIA, that the homeownership payment of $2,500 and the rental payment of $1,800 is $700 a month. Well, then I would say, can you take that $700 a month and use that to either pay down your debt or put it into a savings account every single month on the first day of the month for a whole year? That's the best way to practice. Take the difference between your current rent and your affordability payment as a homeowner, right? All in, and take that and save it or pay off debt every single month. So you could take that $700 and say, okay, I'm going to have a debt reduction plan and I'm going to have a savings plan, and I'm going to start throwing money at reducing my debt. So maybe I'm going to do $700 a month, reduce my debt, and then I'm going to put that $700 a month towards savings, or I'm going to split it up. But every single month, I'm going to take that $700 and apply it to either debt reduction or savings. And I'm not going to touch my savings. I'm not going to go dip back into it. If you can do that every single month for a year, then you are like way closer to being prepared to do homeownership than people who've never done that. Because once you make your mortgage payment, the bank is not giving you that money back, right? It's gone. You can't get it back. So it's a great way to test the waters and see if you're ready to have that higher cost. The other thing you could do is you want to make sure your credit, continue to fix your credit, pay off your debt as low as possible, make it the goal to get so your monthly debt is no greater than $300 a month. Because I'm telling you, the first 2 years it's going to be tough. And then keep in mind that even though your mortgage payment is fixed, your taxes, insurance, and HOAs are going to increase every single year. Every single year. That's why those ratios are there in the beginning. We want to start low because we know over time that is going to increase. And your income may not keep pace with the increases in your taxes, insurance, and HOA dues. So you got to allow yourself some wiggle room.
The only other thing that I think I'll add to that, Sherry, is, we all are putting money into our 401ks. And I think that's great. I think that's something that everybody should do. But when you're prepping to purchase your first home, I do think that, sitting down and figuring out how much should you be putting into your 401k is really important, because you're also saving to buy your first home. And so a lot of us really will pack money into your 401k, but when it comes to buying a house, we look at savings. And once you put your money in a 401k, it's not the easiest to take it out. Or you've got tax implications. Or if you decide, look, I've got plenty in my 401k and I want to do a loan out of it, there's payments associated with that.
Yeah.
And I think something that we seldom forget about is when you borrow money against your 401k, your lender is going to add the payment on that to your ratios. So that's going to affect you.
Yes.
But not only that, if let's say you go on maternity leave or sick leave, or you change jobs, one of the things that everyone, it just, goes past us, we don't even pay attention, is those loans are required to be paid immediately.
Yeah. You got a certain number of months to pay them back, or you have to then count it as income. And if you're not 59 and a half or older, you'll have to pay some penalties along with the taxes on that. So when you borrow money, when you borrow money, you don't have to pay taxes. It's when it becomes when you have to pay it back, or now if you can't pay it back within that specific period of time, you then have to declare it as income. And that's when you get hit with the taxes and the penalties. So you've got to be really careful about that. There are some questions in the chat box that are some really good ones.
We can't see the questions in the chat box.
Okay.
If I'd love to answer them. Adolfo's here too.
Yep.
Okay. So how much fee?
Sorry, I can help you with that. I'll go ahead and ask you.
Okay.
Does college FA have a mortgage insurance for the life of the loan?
Sorry,
Does
what was the question?
College FA?
College FA.
No. No, only if you get the FHA product. So FHA is different from Cal HFA. So only the FHA, Federal Housing Administration loans, have mortgage insurance for the life of the loan.
So this is about Cal HFA.
Yeah, California Housing Finance Agency.
Right.
Cal HFA loan products do not have mortgage insurance for the life of the loan unless you're doing a Cal HFA FHA loan. That's a tongue twister.
Right. The next question is, how do I choose a lender to get a pre-approval from?
It's going to depend on, if you're looking to work with one of the City of San Francisco's loan programs, you need to look at their approved lender list and choose someone from there. If you're looking to do something outside of San Francisco, you can use anybody you want. And I would say that you want to do your own homework and then do some research and talk to at least 3 different loan officers about what kind of products they have available. If you know you've got particular issues like low credit or no credit or low income or not enough savings, let them know up front so that they can tell you if they have products available that fit your criteria. What do you guys think, Adolfo and
Well,
Mariana?
I think it comes down to really just having a conversation with your loan officers, like Sherry mentioned. Yeah, take the time to interview 3 loan officers, kind of figure out which of the 3 loan officers you feel the most comfortable with, because as Mariana mentioned, you're sort of dating as you're going through this transaction. So communication is the key. You want to make sure that you work with a lender that's very transparent, right? That's going to explain things to you thoroughly, so you understand things, so you understand the information that's been presented to you. And you also want to feel comfortable that you can go to the lender any particular time. Very key is working with the loan officer that is very good at communication and is also willing to do what is best for you as a consumer.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The next question is, when do you recommend starting the loan pre-approval loan process if your job has been impacted by COVID, such as in the hospitality industry, and you have been furloughed for most of last year?
With that one, that's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah.
If you've been furloughed, some people are still receiving compensation. So it's really going to come down to, how much money are you making, and the money that you are receiving, would that be enough to put you in a home that you're happy with? If you're thinking, I'm only getting 50% of my comp, and that's going to put me in a neighborhood that I don't want to live in, then that, you want to wait until you're back at work making, the most money. You also have to, what Sherry's, hinted at, and I think that we let ourselves, get so excited about buying a home, is that the first year, the first 2 years, it does become overwhelming. So when you're asking yourself, can I afford this today? It's one thing making the payment, but if the water heater breaks, would you be in a position to pay for that? You're talking a couple $100s for that.
At least.
Right. So you've got the contractor to pay. So if stuff goes wrong, would that add to the current stress that you're living in today? And if it does, then I would say, hey, let's wait to I hopefully, knock on wood, that we're at the tail end of this pandemic and that things will start returning, to normal with the vaccinations and such. But I don't want to put anyone in a position that's going to add more stress to an already stressful situation.
And I just want to add something really quickly. So, talking about generally when you want to get pre-approved, it really depends on your time frame as to when you want to make your purchase. So if you know that, hey, I want to make my purchase within 1 to 3 months, I definitely recommend that you get pre-approved a month before you start looking at properties, right, and submitting offers. Now, if you're sort of like a year or 2 away, then the best thing to do is just sort of sit down with the loan officer or lender and just have a consultation. Just want to see where you stand, share your goals, share your plans, share where you want to be, what sort of purchase price you're targeting and affordability. And then we'll help you come up with some sort of strategy or plan to get to where you need to be down the road.
And, while you're waiting, if you decide right now is not the right time, you can continue to work on your credit and save money, manage your expenses, really look at make sure you've got a budget going. You've got to be tracking your expenses. But there's always stuff you can do in the meantime. And the more money you have saved up to put down, the better position you're going to be in, because, the other thing you do is you've got extra money, you can use that to buy down your interest rate. So even though interest rates are going up, you can always do what's called a permanent buy down of your interest rates. That's where you pay points to reduce your interest rate permanently. And so if rates go up to 4%, but you've got an extra $5,000 or $6,000 and that will get you back to a 3%, then you want to do the 3% and lock it in, because right now the points that you pay to buy down your rate on a purchase are still tax deductible. Whereas if you do it as a refinance, none of the costs of refinancing are tax deductible, but points paid on a purchase are tax deductible. So, save your money and wait.
And points is just a one-time charge that you pay up front. So
One-time charge. Yep.
So
One-time
we
charge.
got a couple more questions. I want to make sure I get through those because we are a little past the time. So the next one is, can you tell us how jumbo loans differ from regular loans?
So a jumbo loan is what we would call a portfolio loan. Some people will call them jumbo loans, non-conforming loans. The difference is your loan size. So
They're larger.
They're a lot larger. And so you've got a limit, right? I got to look it up, but I believe a jumbo loan starts at 756,000.
22.
Yeah, so they're pretty
for
big.
single family.
Yep.
Yeah, so they're bigger loans. So that's a jumbo loan. With a jumbo loan, you do have a requirement of 20% down. Your debt to income, there are no exceptions to your debt to income ratio. It cannot exceed 43%. But at this loan level, you've got a reserve requirement. So if your penny, property taxes, insurance, and HOA, if that figure is 5,000, you've got to have 18 months times 5,000 in reserves after your down payment, after your closing costs. So there are a little bit more requirements.
I'm sorry, did you say 18?
18 months.
You say
Yeah,
18 months times 5,000? That's Wells Fargo's requirement.
Yeah, it's going to vary
That's
from
Wells
lender to lender.
Fargo. So she's.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you've got a
Other
reserve
lenders may only
requirement.
have. Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So you've got the reserve requirement, and you've got a FICO requirement at that point. So you've got to have great credit.
The next question is, what factors contribute to how high or low the interest rate a bank gives you is for your mortgage loan?
I'm sure. So it's going to be, one is going to be your credit score. Two is going to be your down payment, the type of loan program that you're choosing, whether it's a fixed rate mortgage versus an adjustable rate mortgage, also the term of your loan. So if you're choosing a 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage, those are some of the factors that impact your interest rate.
And then you've got occupancy, and occupancy could be a big one.
Yeah.
Let's say we had earlier a question, if I buy a duplex and I have someone help me, can I do that? And the quick answer is yes. If, let's say you've got a co-borrower on the loan to help you qualify, but that co-borrower does not have any plans to live with you, that automatically turns your occupancy into a rental, and guidelines change drastically on that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Next question is, I know that getting a pre-approval from a lender will impact my credit score, but what if I get a pre-approval from multiple lenders? Will each credit pool impact my score?
So I'll take that one. So generally speaking, every time someone pulls your credit, your score is going to be impacted. So there's kind of this rule of thumb that says, if you're going to go shopping for a car or a mortgage, you want to do it all within the same 14-day period. And supposedly it's only supposed to impact your credit once. So I've seen variations on that. So I would suggest, again, work with a housing counselor to find out what your range is, and then go mortgage shopping. But typically outside that 14-day period or window, it will start to impact your credit scores. Any other questions out there? I know we're over, so we're happy to stay here and keep asking questions. I've got to go in about 7 minutes, but we can keep answering questions. So someone said, can I get help from a housing counselor even though I do not wish to buy a home yet? If so, what are the steps to do that? And Catalina put in response to that, you can email info@homeownershipsf.org. Housing counselors are here to help you regardless of what stage of readiness you might be in. You know, our whole job is to help walk you through some of the strategies to overcome whatever obstacles may be presenting themselves to you. We are solution focused. And so, yeah, feel free to contact any of the housing counseling agencies and get started right away. And for our agency, we like for you to actually take a workshop so that you could get kind of the big picture information first. So we have an intro to homeownership workshop, rental readiness workshops, credit building and repair workshop, and I can't remember whatever. We got a bunch of workshops. You can go to our website and find out more about that. But yeah, anytime you're ready to get started, we're here to help. And someone said, how much should be put in as an estimate for HOA increases per year? Boy, that's a good question. HOAs are private entities. How much they might increase from year to year is anybody's guess. Think of it as a a city without rent control. There is no HOA control. They can increase it whatever they want. And I tell people, if you're going to buy into a condo or townhouse in any place with an HOA, you better get involved in those meetings. Do not just sit by and let the HOA make rules and regulations that are going to impact you without being involved in those meetings. Let your voice be heard. Yeah. All right. Okay. I need to get going because I have another workshop. We're doing MOHCD home buyer programs orientation starting at 3:30, and I think it's full, but we have them every month. So so we will thank you for attending, and feel free to check us out, sfhdc.org. You can sign up for any of our workshops on our webpage. And we look forward to seeing y'all.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sherry and Adolfo, and I'm sorry, Lorianne. We appreciate you being here. Thank you. And thank you for all the participants.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
one. Bye.